G'day, it's Rowan from Elf Shop Design. Well, the atmosphere in the man cave is nice and dark and moody. It's pretty nice, except there is one small problem. When we're watching a movie at night with the lights turned off, it can be a little bit too dark when you're trying to reach for your snacks. So I'm going to build a coffee table that gives us somewhere to put our snacks and drinks, and it's also going to have a glowing bed of coals made out of resin to add a little bit of ambient light. Let's go and check it out. While we're talking about checking things out, I've dropped a new song and I'd love to get it out there. It's a big hard-hitting electronic track with Mongolian throat singing style vocals. If you're interested in that kind of thing, please have a listen and add it to your playlist. Okay, on with the show. Let's get started with some timber prep for the tabletop. These are hardwood skirting boards left over from the house renovation. Rip, strip, cut, dress and glue. Now I'm always trying to think of unique materials to use in my builds. I quite like this C-section. It's quite heavy. It's a little bit more original than the standard square hollow section approach that you see in a lot of furniture. So I was lucky enough to have this piece and a longer piece left over from a couple of earlier builds. I did the amplifier cabinet, which was, I don't know, about a year ago. And quite a while ago I made a stone seat. And this is the rest of that steel. It was a 9 metre length. So this is a little bit shorter than what I would have probably gone for the coffee table legs, but given this is what I've got, this and a slightly longer piece, I can get the other 3 legs out of the other bit. Right, so now that I've cut my legs, I've got to start thinking about how this whole thing's going to go together. And I'm thinking from the top down, because it's got quite a few layers. Let's spin it up and have a look. So if you look from the top, we'll ignore the tempered glass that's going to sit on the whole thing for now. Starting with the resin layer, that's about 20 mils. I've done a couple of test pieces and they work out at about 20 mil high. Underneath that, we need 10 mils for the LEDs to poke through some 3 mil MDF. Underneath that, we need to leave some space to wire it all together. So I think maybe 10 mils is probably enough for that. And then the whole thing's got to sit on something rigid. I've got plenty of yellow tongue flooring, which is 19 mil thick. So let's think that's 19 plus 10 plus 10 plus 20. We're just on 60. That's pretty good. So I can use this 65 mil flat bar around the side of the table, and then everything in the middle will be hidden. All the layers will be hidden behind that 65 mil flat bar. Works out well. Means I don't have to go and buy anything. That's always good. Sometimes I put a little N for north to make sure I put things back together the right way. The next stage is sketching out the resin shape. The pinstriping tape helps me check I've got smooth curves. In the bandsaw, I find sometimes it's good to follow lines slowly and precisely, Other times I just wing it and go with the flow. I'm going with that option here. Since these strips of timber are fairly thin, I'm going to glue some MDF to the back. That'll give them more rigidity, and I can include a slight overhang to ensure the MDF isn't visible against the edge of the resin. After it's dry, it needs a bit of sanding to fit in the metal frame. I remembered I needed something to screw the yellow tongue baseboard into as well. The piece I cut out of the middle can become the base for my silicone mould. I was hoping to use this duct tape to form a vertical wall for the resin, but it's a little bit too soft. Not very happy with that, so I'm going to try something else. I've got this drawer liner, which is a little bit more rigid. It's still flexible enough that it'll go around the corners. So I'll try and silicone that around the edges and see if that gives me a better result. It's still a bit soft, but I think it'll be okay. So now I'm just going to go around the edges and start adding rocks. Just with silicone. This edging worked pretty well when I put it around the sides. It stuck to the timber, or it seemed to. Got all the rocks in, and then put it out in the sun to dry. And this just buckled up and came off the sides. So, in the bin with this. So I started sticking tape back on again and overlapping it. The theory was that it would make it a bit thicker and a bit more rigid. Still didn't really work. It sort of doesn't really stick to the silicone very well at all, really. So I've had to kind of cheat as much as I can. I've run hot glue around the seam, and then I've just propped it up with bits of wood just to hold the tape as vertical as I can. What I'm going to do now is flood the bottom of this with some 50% glue and water mixture, and what that'll do is it'll help determine if there's any leaks, so it'll test my dam, but it'll also fill up the bottom of the rocks a little bit, just fill up some of those cracks so the silicone doesn't have to work its way down too deep. Well, viewers, no leaks, and here we are a few hours later. The silicone is completely set, so I'm now going to pull it apart and we'll see how it looks. So what I've done is I've wet a piece of 3mm MDF here, and that allowed me to pull in this curve along the edge of the wood that I'm actually using for the coffee table. And now I'm just gluing down these strips along the edge of the MDF. That's just going to help pull it in. So when I take the clamps off, it'll naturally spring back a little bit. But I'll put some weight down on these pieces of timber here to hold it in when the clamps come off. And then the clamps will be out of the way, so I can run a bead of silicone along the edge of this MDF. So I'll do that on both sides and make sure that I've trimmed the silicone mould as well, so that's exactly the right width for the cast. So it's a lot of mucking around, but we really want to make sure we don't have any leaks with the resin because it's expensive and I don't want to do it twice. A couple of dabs of silicone down just to hold the mould down. although I'm not expecting it to float because this should be a nice tight fit. Here's the old floppy silicone. I did do a test fit and it fits pretty well. It needs a little bit of coercion in the corners, but generally I think it should be okay. We want a nice tight fit around the outside so we're not wasting resin. I just made a really basic silicone mould with the same rocks I'm using as a test. The first one was sort of semi-opaque. Second one was using more of a grey and black. And then the third one is using the black on the outside and then a red underneath, which the light will shine through. So this is the version I'm going to try and model in the main pour. Got a silicone mat to keep it nice and tidy. I've got my jewellery scale to measure by weight. Got some black pigment here. First cup is for the first mix. Mix that up for a couple of minutes, let it sit for a minute, then mix it for another minute, and then pour it into the second cup, just so it leaves anything in the cracks behind, and I pour from a nice clean mix of resin. This is just a 2-for-1 basic resin mix. This will do up to about 15 ml deep, which is fine for this first layer. Well, here's the resin piece I got out of the mould. I've given it a bit of a sand around the outside already. Hopefully you can see there the top of the coals are nice and black, and then it moves into a deeper red as it goes lower down. So we'll sit this down now and I'll show you what I'm going to do next. Sometimes you need to change your plans. In this case, I had this thing all cut up and marked out. There's 100 holes in here. I've marked out red, orange and yellow for the LED lights, and they're flickering ones. And the idea was that I was going to have 10 series circuits in 10 parallel, so making 100 bulbs, and control each circuit with Arduino to control how much brightness. So turn it up and the coals glow hotter. But it's a lot of work, and I found out that the flickering LEDs need to have their own resistor. You can't just have one resistor for a series of 10 or 20. So I thought to myself, maybe I'll just try an easy test. I had an RGB LED strip. I chucked underneath, did a test, and it actually looks pretty good. I've run some MDF strip around the outside, which makes the resin sit off the table at the right height, allows enough space underneath to curl up the RGB strip. And I'll just poke it down a hole so you can access the power. So that's the plan. I'm using this old epoxy which was supposed to expire about 10 years ago. It's a 2-to-1 industrial strength epoxy and hasn't let me down yet. After poking the RGB power plug through a hole and taping the sensor underneath, I screw the 2 timber top sides to the baseboard and we're almost done. This self-adhesive foam will help level the table if the floor is uneven. If it comes off, I can replace it with something else. Here's a few shots with and without the glass so you can see the glowing resin detail.